Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Crush It Trading Live. Recap and steps from yesterday, December 4th, 2024. Still waking up here a little bit. But let's just jump right in and we will start talking about the setups that took place yesterday. Had a pretty good day. A lot of setups took place yesterday. Let me get set up here real quick. All right. Here's Apple. We always start with Apple. So basically, if you're new here, the main tickers that we trade: AMD, Amazon, Meta, Apple, Tesla, Nvidia, and sometimes Microsoft. But the three tickers that we trade the most are Tesla and Nvidia, and then AMD also. So that's all we really need to make money off the strategy. This is what makes it a great strategy. You don't have to fish for stocks. You don't have to look around. You don't have to do all the research. These stocks have the highest volume daily. They have the average true volume. ATR, the average true range. Sorry. So with that, you don't need to fish for a lot of stocks. You can just get up, you can get your charts set up. You can wait for the open, and you get your Fibonacci's and your Bollinger Bands are set, and you just pretty much wait for the steps to take place. So what we're going to go over here this morning is how that took place yesterday, and that'll help us prepare for today. And here we are on Apple. So on Apple, it looks a little choppy. Now, remember, we're looking at this after the fact. So, you look at it and, consciously you look at this and you go, well, that's really choppy. But let's consider the fact that, we're looking at this within the first 5-15 minutes of the open. And we're not necessarily going to see, all that chop right away. So, as you're coming in here and you're getting your retest in here and you're looking for your entry, you might not see that chop yet. So I think it's important to talk about that, because a lot of times you're going to be in the trade and you're going to get chopped around, right? Today is Thursday. We got Friday tomorrow. So if we're trading options, maybe we want to consider next Friday's expirations. So if we have to hang tight through the chop, we don't have theta eating away at our profits at the premium. So, but do we have a trade here on Apple? So you do see we have a move to the upside here. This is the wick zone. I like to mark the wick zone on the 5-minute candle here. But we don't really get a good play. You kind of get faked out here, then it moves to the downside. So the only play we really had on Apple yesterday was this move off the crush it zone right here. Got a nice move off the crush it zone, and let's move this on to the onto the 1 minute here. And here it is right here. And I'll set the risk reward. So this was a really good trade. We were in the close to the sell zone here, but what I wanted to show you on this here is we have a little bit of convergence going on here. And usually when you get these inside wedges like this means that price wants to go to the upside. So that's a good indicator for me right there that we got a move to the upside coming. And I wanted to show you also on Apple. We talked about this yesterday. Here's the 1 hour. We broke all-time highs, right? And we put our Fibonacci levels in on the 1 hour, and we had a perfect touch on here for a move to the downside yesterday. So this was a really good move to the downside on Apple. We made it all the way down to the 0.618 level here, which if you look at your intraday fib levels, where does that put us? Right here in the crush it zone. So being able to identify this right here, you see that? And we have a descent or an ascending trend line here. So you kind of got to put all these things together, and you can see that we got a pretty good high probable trade right here. So, if you're trading all day long, now I'm not here at noon, but if you were here at noon and you were looking at this, this is a really good setup. It's a really good setup. Not a bad setup for a swing either. I think this might play out pretty well over the next coming days here, next 3 or 4 days. All right. What else do we got here? Let's move to, let me just want to make sure there's nothing else on here. That's Apple for the day. We're going to keep an eye on that too. We don't need the intradays from yesterday on here anymore. So what we'll do is we'll focus in on drawing those new levels out here at the open. Get rid of these here. All right, Amazon. Amazon also is kind of hanging out in all-time high area. Okay, we had a break there. So I drew the fib levels in also for this. Now, anytime we break all-time high, the first thing I do is I go right to the 1 hour and I draw my 1 hour fib levels out. And you can see yesterday we hit those. And now today we're consolidating in that area. So I'm going to expect a possible, I'm not going to try to predict it, but I guess I'm going to expect a possible pullback here back down to all-time highs if we're going to move higher. Okay. I want to get some kind of retest there. So being that we're at the crush it zone right here, once again, expectations, we get a move down to the all-time high, which is about a $3 move. I don't know if we'll get that today, but we should get some kind of movement at least to the other side of the crush it zone. And here is our continuation strategy. So this took off. You got your 5-minute wick zone here, and this just took right off. You didn't really get any retesting, but how to identify this is we can see it starting to channel right in here. So look at this 10-second right here. This to me is good indication. We do get a nice move up here. You can see what's starting to channel here also. You can see how it kind of starts to set up just like this here. And that is a decent move up to the crush it zone. And that was a $2.25 move. Now, you're not going to get in the full move, obviously, but take about 70% of that, and you can easily catch 70% of that move right there. So I was talking about Amazon in the room yesterday. I don't like to take Amazon. I just, I usually watch, for me, I usually watch Tesla and NVIDIA. And if those don't set up, then I'll kind of gravitate towards AMD. If I don't have any setups in there, then I'm looking at, either Apple, Amazon, or Meta. But that was the Amazon trade. It's a really good trade there on Amazon. Good continuation to the upside, right to the crush it zone. And then at the crush it zone, we get the pullback down to the 0 line right here. So you get a nice move. And this one here also worth about $2. Now remember, it's good to have, it's good to have, these retests and these nice touches like this. You got a nice touch here on the far side of the crush it zone. You may or may not have considered this a stop out, depending on where you put your stop. But I usually put my stop at the 50%. So had you gotten in on this nice touch right here, down to the 0 line, your stop would have been at the 50% here. So you still would have been in the trade. Sometimes I like to do tight stops. I'll take about 25% of the zone. I still would have stayed in this trade. I might even have considered adding to it. And the reason why is you can see that when we come in, we're kind of like, excuse me, we're kind of like above the crush it zone here. But if you think about that now on the 5 and the 1 hour, that's usually the wick. And you can see on the 1 hour here, that is the wick of the crush it zone. And this took place at about 10:50, 11 o'clock. So you're right at that magic hour, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. Those are good hours. So, you're close enough to the hour where you can hang tight to see if it's going to move higher or move down. And, as we move down, we got this retest right here into this traffic area for a move to the downside. So I would say that, considering, late in the day, for a late in the day setup, I would consider this a pretty decent setup. Now, I would be willing to bet with the volume yesterday that this is probably really slow moving. So you had to have been really patient with Amazon, and Amazon doesn't really pay super well, super fast. And if you're working with like today and tomorrow with theta, you might want to consider stock or next week's put options on Amazon for that crush its own trade. All right, let's get rid of some of these here. All right, let's go to Microsoft. Microsoft, you get a nice retest. So you can see we break the first one right here, and we get into the crush zone, and we do it a second time. The first one's a little bit, excuse me, a little bit more, difficult, a little bit more complex, because you can see we got this check candle right in here. So let's move to the upside. It's channeling. So that's the thing that I like, is I like to see when it's channeling. And you get the same thing here on the 10 second. We're channeling, and we get that retest right here on the 10 second. You see that? So to me, I like this. This is a good move to the upside. You can take it all the way up to the crush it zone right here. Okay. And then coming back in the crush it zone, what I like about it is we're outside the Bollinger Bands. Outside the Bollinger Bands. Remember, we're above the crush it zone, but that's most likely the wick. Let me see if I can apply this here real quick. That's the wick on the 1 hour right there. See that? That's the wick. You're going to get wicking on the larger time frames. So don't be afraid if you get a little bit above. So if you're trying to manage this trade and your eyes are focused in on the 10 second and the 1 minute, you're going to start getting into freak out mode here, because you're going to think you're going to get stopped out. And that's why we wait for this 5 minute candle to close. What I like about this one here is you're at 9:55, right? So you only got to wait 5 minutes for that 10 o'clock candle. And what does this do? It comes down, and there it is. There's your proof right here on the 1 hour. It's wicking out right there at the crush it zone. But once again, a nice trade there. And then you have a nice move from the crush it zone outside the Bollinger Bands on the 5, the 1, and the 10 second. All three of them are outside the Bollinger Bands. Let's look at our oscillators, and their oscillators are at 137%. We're in the sell zone, and we do get a crossover on the MACD. There's really not much else to ask for. A plus setup right there. Yeah, everything's in line. All right. And then you have another retest right here, right below VWAP. But think about this now. I told you these are the wicks of the larger time frames. I think I erased VWAP here. There's VWAP there. There's right here. Look at nice wick right down to that touch there. Move to the upside. So even if you'd have waited, now here's another thing that gets people into hesitation mode, right? You're at 1019 right here, and you've gone up, and in your mind you're like, you know what, I missed the trade. And then it pulls back and you get nervous again. You're like, well, wait a minute, is it going to pull back, or is it going to go forward or go up? And this is where you have to trust the system. And I did this yesterday in Tesla. We're going to talk about Tesla. I did get stopped out. I made money, but we're going to talk about that. But you got to understand, I would take the pullback, because you have a high probability of hitting the crush it zone, and you can see that it does. And you can go back and back test these on many of the tickers that we trade, and you're going to see it over and over and over and over again. You're going to con yourself into thinking you missed the trade. You're not going to get into it now, when really, look at the 5 minute. You got this nice hammer candle right here. If you look at it on the larger time frame, this is calling out a nice trade to the upside. So even if it pulls back, right, you got a nice pullback to get in. We don't know how far it's going to pull back, so we can start scaling in a little bit. And then it's going to take off, and then you're going to get in, and you're going to scale at the crush it zone right here. So that's how you kind of manage this. Hesitation. Is there music? Sorry, guys, I can't hear any music. I don't even have any music playing here. Hopefully the music is out. Sorry about that. What time is it? Forgive me. All these little quirks. Sorry about that. Yeah, I have it turned off. I don't know why it's bypassing through the mic here, or the Rodecaster that I have. So hopefully you're able to hear everything I was talking about earlier. So I apologize. But we'll start off here with Microsoft again. If you didn't hear anything for Apple and Amazon, I'll go back here at the end and do that again. So just let me know. So, okay, I'll go back and do, well, you know what? So let me finish Microsoft and I'll go back real quick and do a quickie on Apple and Amazon. Every day I try to do a nice little stream here thinking it's good, and there's always one little thing that messes the thing up. So we'll get there. Practice makes perfect, right? As long as you're practicing the right thing. Anyway, so you can see what I was talking about here on Microsoft is the fact that we got this move above the wick zone right here, and the retest that I liked on this one here was right here on the 10 second at 937. So we got a nice retest. We're starting the channel. You get this move to the upside, and we do hit the crush it zone. Now in the crush it zone, what I like about the crush it zone is we're outside the bands, and I was talking about the fact that we're in the crush it zone. We're above the 1% line here, 100% line. And, a lot of times you can think, well, what's it going to do? And we're at 9:50, 9:55. We're almost at 10 o'clock. So you look at your 1 hour, and it's worth waiting, I think, because you can see, the smaller time frames. These are the wicks of the larger time frames, right? And so you can see it wicked out here. We did close below on the 1 hour, right? It's worth the 5-minute wait. And we do get that move to the downside on Microsoft once that 1 hour candle closes. Like I said, you can see, and then not to mention the oscillators, right? We're at 130, 140%. You're outside the Bollinger Bands on all three smaller time frames. And, that's another good trade. And then, we talked about the fact that it comes down and it retests the wick zone also again, and we're outside of the VWAP right here. So you can convince yourself easily to not get in the trade. So we're talking about hesitation here. Like, why am I not going to get in the trade? So if I come back over here, you can see we're below VWAP. You're focused in on the smaller time frames. You're hesitating. You're like, well, wait a minute, is price going to go down because it's below? Remember, this is the wick of the 5-minute, the larger time frame. Look at that candle right here. So now you wait for this 5-minute candle to close, and this 5-minute candle closes, right, at 10:20, which is right here at 10:20. So now you're thinking to yourself, well, I thought it was going to go down because we're below VWAP, and now it's up, and now it's too late to get in the trade. So you've just talked yourself out of the trade twice, okay? And so now it pulls back, and you're like, well, wait a minute, what's it going to do now? So this is why we do the retesting. We work the probability out. This is why we understand that once we break that, we have a high probability, we have a high chance of getting to the crush it zone. So what I was saying earlier is if this pulls back into traffic here, I'm not going to hesitate. I'm going to take the trade. I'm going to take the trade right here. I'm going to take it to the crush it zone, and I'm going to get out if I get a close below VWAP into the wick zone again, okay? And if I really wanted to be a little bit more aggressive, I can take my stop and I can move it down, right? I'm still at a 2-point risk reward ratio in the crush it zone, right? I can still take this trade. So even though on the 5, right here, on the 5, even though you're closed up here, let's just say that this is where you closed at, right? And you got in right here. You still have this move from here to the crush it zone, which is $1.64. High probability. So, obviously you do want to get in as close to the pivot as possible, but you have to make sure, right, that things are coming into line, right? And so a 2 risk reward ratio is pretty good. So, even if you got in this pullback here, and if you had gotten in a little bit up here, a little early, and your cost basis was in here, right? We're going to be below a 2-point, but you can also take this, and you can see this level right here. If you wanted to tighten up your stops, you could always tighten it up in here. And if you did break down in here, you could use the 84% rule and take this again to the upside. So there's different ways of managing this and getting through it, okay? I don't know if this is making sense at all. So there's Microsoft. Let's go back and talk about Apple real quick since the music was playing. So we talked about this yesterday. Anytime a stock breaks all-time highs, it gets me interested in putting in 1 hour fib levels. So I go right to my 1 hour, I put the fib levels in, and you can see we have this nice reaction right to the downside. And here it is here also. So you can see on the intraday on Apple, we don't get to the crush it zone on the intraday, but we're at the 0.618. But the underlying fib level here that we have in here is the 1 hour. So I want to show you this. Look at, we're above the 1 hour. This is going to freak you out. You're gonna be like, well, I don't know, because it's kind of not really at that level there. It's a little bit above, and you can see right here in the 1 hour. What time is this at? 10 o'clock, right? So that's your wick of the 1 hour right there. That's your wick. It does come down. And the thing I want to show you on this one also is we are outside the Bollinger Bands. Also, we're outside the Bollinger Bands on the 5 and on the 1. And so you got a good move to the downside on Apple. Amazon, I erased all the lines on here already, but we had the same situation on Amazon. Now today on Amazon, I'm looking at the 1 hour. So we also above all-time highs. Yeah, when it makes its second attempt, so if it makes an attempt and it fails, and then you see it making another attempt, there's an 84% chance that attempt is going to actually work. So here it is again on Amazon, right? You can see, right here. So here it is. Amazon broke all-time highs, right? I put in the fib levels, and what's it doing this morning? This is the 1 hour fib. It's obeying them, I should say, or it's respecting them. And, suspect, I can't really predict it, but suspect that we're most likely, probably, maybe, could see a move down here at the open, down to the other side of the crush it zone. It's worth looking at. And then we can line these up on the 1 hour with our intradays on the 5 and the 1. We can see how that's lining up. And then what else do we have? We have our oscillators, right? We can see how that's playing out for us. And we can make a decision if we decide to get an Amazon. Now, Amazon's usually going to be my last pick. I'm not focused in on it, but we are a team. So, if somebody's looking at Amazon and another person's looking at NVIDIA, you can certainly call it out, and we'll take a peek at it quick and see if there's a move that we can get in on. Okay, let's move to AMD. I don't really have anything on the larger time frames, AMD. It's kind of channeling right here. It's going to maybe slowly grind to the upside here. We might get a retest today right here for a move higher. We'll see how the market wants to open up. All right. Here is AMD. And let me get rid of this here for a second. First thing I look at when I'm recapping is I look at the 5-minute candle. I look at the wick zone. I look at where I'm at here. Okay. I do get a move down into the crush it zone. High probable trade. I don't really have a retest in here, but what I have here is on the 10-second. See, and I want to repeat, you're not going to get the same identical looking setups in every single one. So you kind of got to use your best judgment. You got to look at things and understand it. That's why we do these recaps. So you can kind of go through the checklist every morning, and you might not hit every single check, but you might hit certain ones that are going to give you indications that we're going to have a good move to the downside. So you can see on the 5, we kind of get faked out in here. We do get a winning trade down to the 0.618, but as it's coming down again for the second time, it consolidates right here in the 10-second, and it's riding down the band. So that's a good indication for me right here that, hey, you know what? We can get into this trade right here for a move at least down to the crush it zone, which is about 50 cents. Good trade. But then you also have a crush it zone trade here. The smaller time frames, you're a little bit outside the Bollinger Bands. You're outside the Bollinger Bands on the 5. And then we have the, what I wanted to show you here. So we have this confluence taking place right here. Oops. Right? We have confluence. So what do we know when we have the inside wedge like this? we know that price wants to move to the upside. So that's good indication for me that price is going to move, and AMD ends up grinding. So it'd have been a babysitter trade for sure. NVIDIA. And this is a trade I took yesterday. Once again, first thing I look at is the 5-minute wick zone here. And we do get a retest, but what I did here, and once again, not every single one of them are going to be perfect. I seen that we kind of came down right here below on the 10-second and the 1. And I noticed we had these check handles here, and I noticed, okay, so we got this move to the downside based on this candle, not necessarily the 5-minute wick over here. So this was a good indication to move to the downside. And what are we doing also is it was channeling right in here. You can see it started to channel. We kind of moved up. We consolidated a little bit. You know, this is where you can get into panic mode. You know, this is like panic territory right here. You're in the trade and, you know, you're kind of panicking. You want it to break. And, you know, you got to be patient. You got to understand you got a 92% chance for this to hit the crush it zone. And eventually it just does. Okay. And once again, you got a nice move to the upside. You're outside the Bollinger Bands. You're outside the Bollinger Bands. And you're just barely outside here on the 10-second. Look at your oscillators. You know, you're not really deep into the buy zone here. So it would be worth. So on this one here, I think it would be worth a try. I probably wouldn't go heavy on it. I wouldn't go heavy on it. And see, the time is at 10 o'clock. Remember I told you the 10 o'clock hour? Look at that, 10 o'clock. So that's another thing. Now, if this was at 10:45, I'd be a little bit more hesitant. But being that it's right at 10 o'clock, there's a lot of liquidity at 10 o'clock. So you're going to get a nice move there. But once again, just because my oscillators were not really deep into the buy zone, and you can see it on the predictor also, I do get a crossover eventually. I would have waited on this one, but, you know, I probably would have done, you know, 25 contracts for me. I normally try to take 100. So I probably would have went a little light on this one. But I did take this one to the downside. And I did take a few contracts to the upside also. And the last one here, Tesla. Now, this is the one I wanted to talk about because you can see I got the wick zone marked out here. This is a fake out, okay? This is a fake out. You can see that the second candle breaks below the 5, right? We can see that. We get below here, and you can look at the 10-second. See this candle right here on the 10-second? Hang on here. Let me blow this up for you. This candle right here, I want to make this big so you can see it. Where'd it go now? We'll get there. There it is. This candle right here on the 10-second, okay, it closed below the 9, the 20. It got this crossover taking place. This is where I got into the trade thinking, okay, we're going to get this move to the downside. We got a high probable trade of getting down into the crush it zone, right? So I went in big, or my normal, 100 contracts. And as we're moving down, I noticed on QQQ that it was moving up. And I thought, oh, you know what? I'm going to trim right here at the 0.382 level just in case. And I held on. I think you guys were with me. I was holding on. And right here at VWAP, you know, I thought, okay, so VWAP here, I thought, okay, we're going to get this move to the downside now. At VWAP, we came down. And as it started to move back up again, I thought, you know what? And then QQQs were moving up. SPY, I think, wasn't really doing much at that point. And I thought, you know what? I'm just going to cut this one. I'm going to get back in. You know, I think I had, I don't even know, 50 contracts or something like that. So, oh, you know what? Let me back up. No, I know what happened. So sometimes I forget the trades I make. So I got in here, and then what I did at the VWAP here is I added to it, right? I added, I think, another 50 contracts or something like that. And then I scaled a whole bunch out in here just to kind of put some money in the bank. And then I ended up closing the trade right above VWAP. That's what it was. So that's what I did. I got in. right here for this break below the 5-minute candle wick zone there. And then I scaled some out, got a little nervous, added to it at VWAP thinking we're going to come back down, scaled a little bit more out, and then finally stopped myself out above VWAP right there. So I think it's a pretty lucky trade. I mean, it was going against me the whole time, but I was able to somehow squeeze out about $3,000 in profit on Tesla. Not knowing, obviously, still thinking that, we're going to get that move to the downside, because here's the 5-minute candle right here. So if I go to the 5-minute candle, a lot of times what I like to do is I'll draw this out. 50%. If it's a big, huge candle like this, you'll see a lot of times right at 50%. You can see here at 50%, you kind of get this drawdown right here. Okay, and then it finally moves above it. And if I can stay below that 50%, then I know I'm in good. But if it gets above, then, it's probably time to get out. All right. So that's Tesla. See anything else on Tesla? Yeah, I mean, technically it was a fake out. Probably should have lost money on the Tesla trade, but I was somehow, and I was not that I was trying to, I still thought that I was going to head down. I was just, by managing and scaling a little bit, putting a little bit of money in the bank, I was able to squeeze out. Now, the cool thing about Tesla is it pays really well with shorter moves, and that's kind of why I like to trade it. The IV is a little bit high. It does cost a little bit more money, but it pays well. All right, guys. So that is the setups from yesterday, and let's see what we got going on Tesla for maybe today. So we're going to get into this level up here. So we'll see what Tesla does here. If we break above, look for a retest in the 1 hour for a move higher, possibly, or we can look for a touch here and a move to the downside. But we'll see how that sets up on the 5s. All right, guys. I'll put your music back on, and I will be back in about